Hey guys, it is Spooky Saturday, and we are going to dive into Hellraiser. How many films did you say there was? 10?
There are 10 right now.
Yeah, there are ten movies, and we're gonna dive into all of them. Um, so yeah, let's get started.
Well, first, this was going to be on one of our horror news updates, but I saved it for today because it's part of the Hellraiser thing. And directed David Bruckner, who did such movies as VHS and Southbound, is now in talks, and I think he's even signed up to be the next director of the Hellraiser reimagining. They're not rebooting it, but they're going in a slightly different direction. And one of the directions it looks like they're going to take is making Pinhead female, because in the book, we'll get into that more, but in the book, he has a female voice. So they also hired a writer or two, and I didn't catch their names, so I apologize for that. But that's good news. Now, as we go through, I always like to point out I got a lot of my information, uh, besides my general knowledge. I got from we watched the movie Drum Dums, Decker Shadow, and Mr. H Reviews, who gave me a lot of good info to go with tonight's Hellraiser theme. So, a
Okay.
little extra.
I did not know they were going to make Pinhead a female. That's news to me.
Well, in the book, The Hellbound Heart, which Clive Barker wrote and the first
Mhm.
movie came out of, the line is that, and it's Pinhead, it's not called Pinhead, the fans named him Pinhead, but Lead Cenobite, as even in the first movie in the credits, it's called Lead Cenobite. But that character, it reads in the book, has a high pitched voice like a girl, but seems to be genderless. So Pinhead's not supposed to be either, and they just hired a man to do the part. So it looks like they might go that way and have a girl with in the Pinhead position. So I think that'd be cool. But so yeah,
Mhm. I mean, I'm not
Hellraiser.
hating on it. I didn't
Oh
know.
no,
That's
no, that
that's kind of interesting.
I think that would work given like this is like any other horror movie at the end where the first couple are great, then they stray from the path, then they get a couple things really good at the end, but like Halloween 2018, they really needed to just upgrade the whole thing in a different way. And this has been in development hell forever. So the fact that it's getting made is a good thing. This is like Hellraiser was like the Fantastic Four, where they just made movies
Mhm.
to keep the rights. One example is in the year 2005, two of the movies came out 3 months apart from each other just to keep the rights. And we'll get into more about some of the info behind the movies. But let me start with yes, the novel was called The Hellbound Heart, written by Clive Barker. Now, Clive Barker had already took a stab at making a movie, and he didn't like the way it went. So when this came around, he said, "You know what? I'll do it." So he took over the director duties for the first one, and he was integral all throughout the second one, Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. Um, but he didn't direct anymore. And by the time like the sixth, seventh, and eighth one came out, he kind of distanced himself and said, I don't like this. But so yeah, the first movie came out in 1987, just called Hellraiser. And then Hellraiser 2 came out in 1988. And those two, most horror fans put together because it's one complete story.
Mhm.
You have the same characters, the same arc, where now spoilers for anybody watching, we're completely spoiling everything in this.
Mhm.
So if you haven't seen them, we're sorry. But even if we tell you, it's worth going back to watch. But in the movie, you have Frank Cotton, who is having an affair with his brother's wife, Julia, and the daughter, Kirsty. They say her name a lot in the movies. Um, Kirsty, she's the one who's in one and two Julia comes back, but actually, I think it is. I wrote it down because I don't remember it much. Um, it is Hellseeker in 2002. Her name is Ashley Lawrence, played Kirsty. She came back for like she's not in the whole movie,
Mhm.
but and then later on in the last movie, Judgment, uh, Heather Langenkamp, who played Nancy in Nightmare on Elm Street, had a small role. But um, so back to one and two. In these first two movies, uh, now the lore has changed from the book, so we're kind of straying from the book already because the book does not give the same info. Like in the movies, um, the god is Leviathan, Lord of the Labyrinth, shown in the movie as a giant. Uh, it's like a I forget how to describe it, but I mean it's two upside. It's two triangles that come to a point.
Yeah, like a little pyramid
Yeah,
thing.
but that is Leviathan, Lord of the Labyrinth. Leviathan is not in the book. It's not named like that. But the book calls Pinhead, leader of the Cenobites, but actually the Cenobite known as Butterball is the leader in the book, and they are called the Order of the Gash. And you get throughout this, you get like Princess of the Dead. For this, we'll get to the people who have these names, but
Hmm.
that it already starts to jump. But it's based around the lament configuration, which is the box everybody sees throughout the movie, and if sadomasochism is the theme, where
Hmm.
people are looking for a, a certain amount of pleasure, nothing on earth can satisfy it, and that insatiable need brings the box to them. They kind of like the One Ring in Lord of the Rings, like they want to find each other, but it turns
So,
out you, huh?
oh, sorry. I was gonna say
Yeah.
something, but I'm not
Go
gonna
ahead.
interrupt.
No,
Oh, so like Sado and Masochist, like which one is which? Because like I know one is like they like pain or they like to inflict pain. Like, do you know?
sadomasochist is pleasure from pain.
I know, but there's like it's like oh he's a sadist, oh he's a masochist. Like
Oh,
there's
this
ones that like to inflict the pain. There's ones that like to
a
endure the pain.
masochists like to inflict pain,
Okay.
but these movies are the just kind of home on the term sadomasochist. By the way, sadomasochist was the name of my first band. Fun fact.
Oh really?
I was
Wasn't
12 years old, so
sadomasochist? Isn't that named after some? That's named after somebody. There's a guy.
somebody.
Yeah, a person who he used to shack up with like prostitutes and stuff.
Oh,
Don't
I'll,
you know? Do you know anything
I
about
don't,
that? Or maybe I don't know.
mm,
You can look it up,
no,
all, but
but
there's
that'd be interesting to find out where it came from. I don't.
that's who it came from. Some yeah, I don't know exactly who he was. That's why I'm not. I don't know the details, y'all. I just know it was
Oh,
named after a guy with a lot of hookers.
whoever he was is a bad guy.
Yeah, I don't think he's
So,
a good guy, but
all right. So, in the movie, um, Frank Cotton, the uncle of Kirsty, he finds the box, and that brings the box into play for the movie. Now, because Julia and her husband moved back into the house where Frank was staying, her husband, Kirsty's dad, cuts his hand, and his blood drips onto the floor, and that brings Frank back to life and gives one of the greatest makeup jobs in all movies. Hellraiser's known for people without skin. They do a really good job. Rick Baker, the famous makeup artist, and Frank comes back and he has to consume people almost like a vampire, but they suck people dry, and he regains his skin. Then, and this is also the short version, everybody, but Kirsty accidentally opens the box, and when she runs into Pinhead, she makes a deal with her, and she tells him, "I know somebody who escaped you," and Pinhead's like, "No one escapes us," and she goes, "If I show you, will you let me live?" That does happen, but again, at the end, Pinhead goes back on his word, tries to kill her. Go figure, a demon would do that, but that's that's the basis of the first movie, and then the second movie, she wakes up in a hospital and the box is still in play. And in the end, the Cenobites, which is the name of Pinhead's group, they have to fight another Cenobite, Dr. Chenard, who's made in that movie, and he beats them in a fight, which is the worst part of the first two movies because why would they? They don't even put up a
Yeah.
fight. But that's one downside. But given this was the 1980s, 87 and 88, the effects were great, and the idea was so new where it's not a slasher villain, it's not just some human that went nuts. These were actual demons. And Pinhead says, we are explorers of the further whatever, angels to some, demons to others. And like, but they come from their own hell. It's not Catholic or Christian hell. Like Leviathan is their dark lord, and they are the Order of the Gash. Pinhead is the Hell Priest, and then when Angelique, who comes later in the movies, she's the princess, and so they can be replaced. Cenobites, they have new ones all the time, but the
Mhm.
first two movies, it's your core group. Now I'm going to run through this really fast. Pinhead is the Hell Priest. He has no gender in the book. Um, in the movie, Elliot Spencer is the name of who Pinhead was as a human, who was a British Army general. I think he was a general.
Mhm.
Uh, the female Cenobite, and that's her name in the credits, she was Nicolette, and she was a nun before she became a Cenobite. Chatterer, who has his mouth open and his teeth chatter all the time, turns out to be a small boy who seeked pain and pleasure and found it, obviously. Butterball, who is the fat one, he was a gluttonous human who couldn't satisfy that. And like I said, in the books and comics, he was the leader before Pinhead took over. Um, Angelique became the demon princess and the daughter of hell. She was called stuff like that. And if you probably know who I'm talking about, she has her head split open and cool, by the way. And by the way, they have action figures for all these, and they look great. They're the 8-inch
Mhm.
detail perfectly. I forgot who makes them. I forgot to look that up. And then one of the most famous is the torso, which it's only from the waist up. He looks like Chatterer. He's all white, and he walks on his hands. But at the bottom, some of his spine is still sticking out. And they have some more memorable ones, and some are really dumb. They have a dog in one of the movies, a dog
The dog
Cenobite.
was very scary to me.
What's funny though is when I was catching up on these, somebody brought up like a dog. Well, did the dog open the box? Like, what's going on? How did that happen? And it's kind of funny where it's like, wait a minute, but it's true. So yeah, and then they have one with like a guy who shoots CDs, and then they have one with a
That
camera
was
for his eye. That's from
that was in
three.
the third movie whenever okay, like, the first movie, they made it seem like not anybody could be a Cenobite, like, you have to be a certain type. You're either gonna be a Cenobite or you're gonna be damned to hell forever and be tortured. But, in the third one, they kinda changed the rules a little bit, and Pinhead was able to
Yeah,
turn anybody into one, which was
that's
kinda
why.
weird.
Yeah, that's why the first two are in their own class. Because in the second one, the
Mhm,
doctor is so evil, and he was seeking out the box that
mhm,
he was pushed into that chamber and turned into a Cenobite.
yeah,
Now, what they bring in that movie that's really cool and a lot of horror fans like is in the second one, there's a girl named Tiffany who's in the hospital. She doesn't speak, and she's really good at puzzles. So the doctor gives her the puzzle box. They go in another room because he wants to see what's going to happen. And when Pinhead comes out, they go to kill the girl, and Pinhead stops the female Cenobite and says, "No, it's not hands that call us. It is desire." And I always like that because it shows like they're not just hapless slasher villains. Like if you want us, we're gonna know it's you, and we're gonna come get you.
mhm,
We don't care what other games you play. And then, but they also go back on their deals half the time. Like I said, they are demons. But
yeah,
that was a very cool fact. But the doctor showed that if you are that bad in your heart and mind, you'll probably be a Cenobite. And they picked and choose in different ways. Like the third one does stray so far where anybody could be one. He says in that movie like it's not my usual crew, but they'll do. And like, because that's when the third one on turned into, hold on, where they started to make typical horror movies
Mhm.
using the 90s slasher type thing where, we're going to have, even, I hate to say it, but Motorhead did the song called Hellraiser. And it's
Mhm.
like, we're going to have bands do the songs for the movie. And there's going to be more sex because in the first two, there may have been some sexual stuff, but it fit in what they were doing. Later on, it's just here's boobs and here's this and here's that. Now,
Well,
um,
also they took a lot of the sex stuff out because, it was, like, too racy for the time. Like, there was supposed to be a spanking scene, but they were
yeah,
like, "Oh, that's too raunchy," so,
yeah,
they had to
but
take
they
it
have
out.
but they have people without skin, and they'll go, "That's too bad." And it's like, what are you talking about? So,
I well, it's either freaking sex or violence. I guess violence is fine.
well, I can tell you that a lot of horror community content creators point out that you can have somebody getting their throat slit, but if you put a nipple in your video, YouTube gets mad. And it's like, wait a minute, that's a little different. Like it should be the
Yeah,
other way around. So,
kinda
but
looks
anyway,
backwards.
right. So, uh, in the first movie, Julia brings fresh humans to Frank so he can be brought back to life. Then she dies in that movie, and then in the second movie, the doctor brings Julia back through a mattress she died on in the first movie. Then Julia becomes the big bad, basically, in the second movie, along with the doctor. And that movie is, I find two a little bit better than one, and a lot of horror guys think the other way, but in two they go into the hell world a lot more, and because they're not here on regular Earth, as you say. So I like that aspect. So like the girl who can't speak, when she goes into the demon world or the hell world, you see problems in her life where like her mom it gets like a hand around her mouth. They're cutting into her head to try and lobotomize her or whatnot. And then they show like a carnival, and the last word she ever says is "help my mom" or "mommy" or whatever. But they go into the hell world. You run into what's called the engineer in two, and that's the creature that is climbing on the walls, running after them as they try to escape. And eventually, Kirsty, they pull the skin back off of Julia. She wears Julia's skin, tricks the doctor, gets Tiffany out, and the they turn the lament box into the spike. We'll call it a spike, and then they escape, and that's where that cuts off. So that's a basic summary because we'll go back to that as we go. Now we go into 1992, where Hell on Earth. That's the name of the next one. Now, quick couple things. You get, like I said, we get the new Cenobites. Uh, the main star is Joey, and that's a girl, and she's a reporter who's looking into JP, and he runs a nightclub, and he comes across the Pillar of Souls, which is the pillar with faces and skeletons and spikes and all that goes in a circle, and that's how Pinhead comes back in that movie. The guy JP who owns the club has to bring fresh victims because they basically say throughout these movies that you need blood to get your skin back, or the demons like Pinhead to get their life back. Um, so that's, and then she fights. She actually runs into Pinhead without his makeup. Pinhead, by the way, played by Doug Bradley most of the time. Great performance. It's him without the makeup as Elliot Spencer. So you get, and in two, you, by the way, you get to see how Pinhead was made. I forgot to mention that, where he opens the box and they show the slits being cut and the nails being put in. Um, now, I I went and saw almost all these, well, three on in the movie theater. I was a little too young to see one or two in the theater, but three, even back then, I could tell was so much different. Where Pinhead, instead of saying cool demon stuff, was almost like Freddy Krueger saying almost funny things, and they go actually ultra sacrificial in three, where they go into a church and the girl Joey goes up to a priest and says, "I'm being chased by demons." And the priest says, "Well, demons aren't real, my dear." And she goes, "Then what the F is that?" And it's Pinhead. And Pinhead goes up to the altar, takes a piece out of his skin or a piece of his skin, and he said, "This is my body." And then he puts his hands out like he's on the cross. And he does the Jesus reference. I, even as an atheist, think they went a little too far with that. But because they make it clear that's their own hell. It's not Lucifer. It's not that hell that they're from. They
Mhm.
don't. They never mention like Christian or even Muslim, Buddhist, you name it. None of the stuff we see on Earth are mentioned in this movie, and that's why I like it. It's its own hell.
Mhm.
But I will say there is a comic in the comic books where Pinhead does meet Lucifer. So, but the movies never bring it up.
Okay. Hey,
So,
I'll be right back. Okay.
oh, okay.
Keep rolling.
I'll keep.
I know the
Uh,
stuff.
okay. Oh, it's just us. Okay. So, yeah, 1992, Hellraiser, Hell on Earth. Um, a lot of flashbacks in that movie, but the girl Joey gets to see Elliot Spencer, who helps her in the demon. Like she sees him in World War I, and the battles going on. They put a lot of money and effort into making it look like wartime. Um, they also go to Vietnam, where Joey's dad passed, lost his life, and Elliot helps her defeat Pinhead in the end. But yes, this is where you could see the movie was straying. It was going to fall off the tracks where it wasn't making sense. They were just killing to kill. The first two movies, the Cenobites were after somebody for a reason. People opened the box because they wanted to find pleasure beyond belief. So by three, you had the cliche horror movie thing where, well, there's a way to beat them if we do blank. And that started to fall apart. So now you have a big gap where 1992 was three, and then 1996, Hellraiser Bloodlines. Now there are cool things about this movie, and there are bad things about this movie. Let me get some of the bad out the way first. One, the cliche, they go into space. Not the whole movie, but this movie. Um, Let me let her catch up. Hello,
Hello.
hi.
Hey.
Okay, I'm just gonna keep going. I just got into 1996 Hellraiser Bloodlines.
Okay.
And this movie literally has three or four different stories going on. One is they're in space, and that's bad because
Uh,
that means they're
that's
going up
like
the.
that might be my least favorite out of all of them.
There's it gets
Well,
worse
no,
in
it
some
gets
points, but
worse.
um, you go back to the 1800s, the origin of the box. You see the box, the first box ever being made. This movie gives us Angelique, the Hell Priestess or Princess. Now, this also, this was also the last one to ever be in a theater.
Mm,
After this one, they all were direct to video. Now, you do find out cool things peppered throughout these movies where, like in this one, like I said, the origin of the box, it was a French toy maker who started it, and his bloodline, hence the name of the movie Bloodlines, keeps keeps it going. So you jump in this movie from the 1800s to one of the relatives way off in space, and they digitally bring the box and open it, and Pinhead comes out in the space era. They go to the 1990s, and that guy, because in the end of three, Joey puts a box in a building is about to be made, and she puts it in the cement, and then the building looks like a piece of the box, whatever. But in this one, Angelique pulls the box out of the foundation of the building to bring that back in. And to beat Pinhead, uh, the guy makes a hologram. So Pinhead's standing in front of a guy, and the guy disappears. And Pinhead like, what? And you find out that to beat the Cenobites, you need to make an Alexium configuration, which counters the box, the lament configuration. And at the end, the spaceship they're on closes into a big box and traps Pinhead. Obviously, he comes back, but so yeah, Bloodlines goes into space in the 1800s, but you get the origin of the box, why, who's it made for. Adam Scott, for all you fans of him, he's a very funny actor. He's in the movie, and you also get proto Cenobites, where the group from the 1800s is obviously killed, but they get like their face cut up like Cenobites do. And Angelique, who's from the 1800s, lives on because she gets her skin taken off, and the group brings, as humans, they bring a demon from the hell world to inhabit that skin and such. And Angelique goes on as the princess of death and hell and blah blah blah. So yes, in 1996, Bloodlines was the last of the movies to be in theaters. So the next movie wouldn't come along till 2000, called
So
Oh,
wait,
go
so
ahead.
you said that was the last one in theaters?
Hmm.
I think wasn't uh the the new girl or whatever. She's like the only cool part about the movie or something, right? I mean, like I
Well,
watched that movie a few months ago. I tried to at least, and it was a
oh
drag.
no,
It was
it's
really, it was
it,
awful.
this is the start of where you can pick 4 or 5 things out of the movie that are
Yeah.
really cool or add to the lore of the movies, but overall they dropped the ball.
Well,
Angelique is one of the best parts of
how
to
they
come out of
added
it.
the 3 generations and stuff. I don't
Well,
think that was necessary. It was like they're cramming every type of movie, and I didn't mean the space stuff was like stupid as heck. But then
yeah,
the 1800, when was it? It was like I don't know. That was
it
boring.
was the 1800s,
So like stuff
the
like that, like
origin.
I didn't like that. I don't think
Well,
they needed to do that.
that's the problem of almost every horror movie. You don't want or need the backstory of all these killers, no matter who they are. They went far enough in Hellraiser to show who Pinhead was before he was Pinhead, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But we didn't need to know the origin of the box. And one good example is Rob Zombie's Halloween, where he gave us Michael as a kid until he was older, and nobody wanted to see that. So
Hmm.
they wanted to do that with, they did it with Leatherface too, and that bombed. Where here's him as a child, and like, we don't care. That's not what we're here for. So
Well,
they,
in the third Hellraiser, I think it was kind of weird seeing the two pinheads, or like it's like him as a dude and then him as Pinhead like fighting each other. That was really strange.
yeah,
Like I
that,
don't even know how I felt about that, to be honest.
oh no, I only like that they showed him before, and he talked to the girl Joey for a little while and helped her out. But yeah, he had to combine himself with Pinhead to defeat him. But that's one of those problems with any horror movie where how do you beat something, especially like this? Like Jason and Michael Myers and Freddy, they're all dead already. And Pinhead is an action, his group is demons. Like, it's almost like witchcraft where you need a spell or something, but most of the time you have to get the box and do it backwards, or make it close itself, and that'll make them go away. But as you go on, it's more ridiculous to where how do you get rid of a character like this? How do you fight him? That one, yeah, in 3, he had to absorb himself into
Well, it's
Pinhead,
like they're
and
just
he took
saying
him out.
he just like Pinhead is so evil that like he's his own thing. Like that was kind of weird to me.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I didn't like that concept. I guess I felt like it was
Oh
fine
no.
before,
It
in the first two movies, like it was fine. There
again,
wasn't a lot of Pinhead in the first movie though either. If you think
no,
about
but that worked where you didn't see him till way later in the movie, and not that much, and they
it.
just kind of accented the end of the movie with Pinhead to where here he is, and this is what they do, boom. And then the second one, again, it took a while before you saw him, then boom, and then he fought and died, and oh no, and it should have ended there, tell you the truth.
Yeah,
Um,
well, when I was a kid, I saw Hellraiser, and I just thought like the Frank guy was really scary to me because he was like nothing, and then he just started forming. So that was like horrifying to me. And then just seeing Pinhead for the first time was he was like one of the scariest horror
Yeah.
characters. Like I was like I watched all the horror movies, but like Pinhead and like Leatherface were two of the ones that I was really horrified of, and I was always worried about running into them when I was a kid. You know.
Well, I tell you what, that in that regard, I think I like Pinhead the most, and many people in the horror community bring this up because, okay, Michael Myers and Jason don't speak. Freddy will say some weird stuff or maybe make a sadistic joke.
Like jokes. Yeah.
Yeah, Pinhead, they always say he
He's like
talks almost like a
smart.
doctor. He's very smart. He's very accurate. He doesn't fart around. Now, later on, he does. But,
Yeah.
you know, like one of his most famous quotes is from the second movie where he says, "Your pain will be legendary even in hell." And that's spooky where it's like, oh no, like they're not just going to kill me. Like this is going to get rough. So
Hmm.
that's my appeal with him. It's like he's not just one, he can talk, but when he does, he's very calculating about it, and it's not gibberish. It's not a joke. But yeah, it gets
Hmm.
worse. So
Although, like Clive Barker, when this was like his baby, he didn't want Pinhead to be stupid. He didn't want like the
right.
Cenobites to be dumb. Like he doesn't think that dumb characters are scary. Like he
Mm-mm.
thinks that like intelligent characters like Hannibal Lecter, like the reason why they're scary is
Right.
because they're so smart they could outthink you. Like
It's true.
it's not like Freddy Krueger. Like he's just like he's kind of silly. He's not very scary. You know.
Right. Right. All right. Now the next three movies. We have a word for this in the horror community where these are called the shoehorn movies because these three were scripts that had nothing to do with Hellraiser, but they added Pinhead in so they could get the movies out to keep the rights. So,
Oh,
uh,
can I bring up one thing?
yeah, of
Okay.
course,
So this is one thing that we should have brought up. The first movie it was going to be called Sadomasochist from Beyond the Grave.
that's right.
That was the original title. Um, but I don't even know why did they not go with that title. I'm glad they didn't though. It's a little
I
much.
think I think it's one of those things where they ran the name through a test audience type
Hmm.
situation,
Nobody liked it.
and it didn't land. Like
Hmm.
Halloween was supposed to be the babysitter murders, and
Yeah,
they ask a group of people, or they run it through the company, and it got shut down, or they said you need to change it. And I'm kind of glad they did
yeah,
because it wouldn't have sat well. it
yeah. That's kind of a weird one, huh?
it's
Sadomasochist
too
from Beyond the
much.
Grave.
I mean, technically that's what they are, but that's just too much. So good call. I actually forgot to
Yeah.
write that down. Now in the next one, we go to 2002, Hellraiser Hellseeker. This is the movie where Ashley Lawrence, who played Kirsty, comes back, and in this one is like I said, it's a different story, and they shoehorn in Pinhead. In this one, Ashley Lawrence in the movie Kirsty, her husband, they get in a car wreck. She supposedly dies, and her husband has amnesia. And throughout the movie, he finds that you see that he's a cheating husband, and he may have killed his wife. Spoiler, obviously, but at the end, you find out that Kirsty killed her husband, made them crash, and she made a deal with Pinhead that if she gave Pinhead 5 souls, he would let her live. And that's the basis of that movie. And that's all I really need to say because the
Hmm.
deaths aren't that great, and Pinhead stopped having a group of Cenobites. There were other ones, but in the first two and three, it was him and them, like 4 or 5, and they were together as a group. The
Yeah.
rest of them, it's like it's he became famous, so
Yeah.
they centered on him, and the others came about. But it was good to see her come back. She looked really good, and she was always been a cute. Now I like brunettes, so maybe that's it. But uh, so you get to Ashley Lawrence, and the whole thing's about him having amnesia, and
Hmm.
Pinhead was thrown into this story.
Well,
Um,
I think that the Cenobites and like 1 and 2, I feel like they're so iconic. So it's kind of weird that they never really came back. But some of the Cenobites were actually supposed to talk too,
Yeah,
besides
yeah.
Pinhead, but just
Well, the girl,
because their makeup, they weren't able to like chatter. Like he couldn't move his mouth.
Chatterhead and Butterball couldn't talk.
Yeah.
The female talked in the first two,
hmm
and she was cool.
She was supposed to
Angelique
be
obviously
called.
talked.
Did you bring up her name? Like her
Who?
original name? The
What, the
name that they.
female?
Yeah, like they couldn't use it because it was like dirty. Like
Oh, I didn't write it down.
it's deep throat.
Yeah, because her
They're like
throat
that's
is open
yeah.
and pulled apart.
No, I know, but like they're like that
Oh
sounds
no,
nasty, so we can't
I'm
use
just
that.
I was just commenting like that's how she looked, and that's where the name would have fit.
Yeah.
But no, I'm glad they didn't. She was
Yep.
just a female. But yeah, eventually they didn't. They all stopped. Now in the third one, the guy with the camera for an eye and the guy with the CDs, like the guy with the camera talked for sure. I'm face palming because they kind of ruined it with that nonsense. But
Oh yeah.
um, I dropped my flashing light. God damn it. Okay, going. This is we're still in part two now of the series of shoehorning Pinhead in a movie. 2005, Hellraiser Deader. This one has Kari War, who was in MTV shows like Remote Control, but also the first Anaconda, if anybody remembers that. Um, and in this one, she is an investigative journalist reporter, right? And you find out that Datter is because the cultish group who wants to bring back Pinhead is bringing humans back to life, and they're trying to get it right to where they can bring Pinhead back. And Kari War's character is trying, and this all happens in London, by the way. She's investigating it, and they have videotapes, almost like The Ring, and then she pieces it together. She finds the group. This movie had a lot of bad CGI, and Pinhead comes out, and literally there's five people on one side of her and five on the other, and he shoots a weapon through all of them and pulls them into hell all at one time. He doesn't torture anybody barely anymore. It's really ridiculous. So that's why I'm flying through this one. I'm trying to see why I have this, but I don't know. So yeah, that's why they call it deader, because they call them deaders when they bring somebody back to life after being stabbed or killed. And this one also, these three in the shoehorn have a lot of fake scares where something happens and then the character wakes up.
Mhm.
And that's terrible for any movie, and nobody likes that. So because you have no stakes. Like, why get invested in a character, care if they live or die, when almost everything could not happen? So this one did not go over well with mostly anybody. It kind of just drifted away. Now, this this is where Deader came out in 2005, and 3 months later, also in 2005, Hellraiser Hellworld came out. In this movie, you have I'll get to the people who starred in it in a minute, but in this one, Hellworld is the name of a video game, and that's how the people get involved in the movie. And the game leads them to a mansion, like cliche, and you find the mansion is run by Lance Hendrickson, who was in Bishop and Aliens and many other great movies, Pumpkinhead. Um,
Mhm.
and they pull an eyes wide shut. Everybody wears a mask with a number over it, and then you pick up a phone and you call the number, and you can have anonymous sex with the person you're talking to. Now, one of the leads in this movie is none other than Henry Cavill, aka Superman, from the new DC universe. Superman, you know?
Mhm.
It's Henry Cavill before he was anybody, because a lot of
Oh.
people do their first roles in horror movies.
Mhm.
Um, Now, this also becomes a revenge movie. Lance Henderson's son was killed by these people who worship the box, and so he brings all these people together, drugs them, buries them alive, and they're all drugged. And I mean, it's really convoluted and ridiculous.
Mhm.
Two people make it out: Henry Cavill and the girl who stars in the movie. I forgot to write her name, but she's stars in the show Vikings, which I believe is HBO. But this is like Halloween Resurrection, where they're trying to be updated in the world, where it's part of the computer world and it's part of we're using cell phones, and it's like almost like a real escape room where a clue for real, where a murder mystery, and we have to do this. And other than a couple, and this one has a lot of sex scenes and breast, and like they went back to horror movie trope 101: show death and show nudity. Not needed, doesn't belong in a Hellraiser movie. So the '05 2 movies really sucked, and along with Hellseeker were really that's the shoehorn trilogy. They really were other movies written for the scripts were for other things. To keep the rights, Dimension Films said we need to make a movie. Oh, just take that script and put Pinhead in it, and here you go. And it turned out to be terrible. And poor Doug Bradley as Pinhead kept returning to where now the next movie, 2011's
Well, at that
Hellraiser.
point, he was probably just doing it for the money, to be honest.
Well, he somewhat, but I can tell you that they're just like Comic Con. By the way, Comic Con 2020 has been canceled officially. Sad to say, but I kind of everybody figured. But there are horror conventions, and he said he loved meeting his fans and being so iconic. So he wasn't even really in it for the money as much. Where
Well, no,
he's
like
like,
I've seen him at like those conventions, and he said that he didn't like doing those sequels at all. He's like the fans don't like it.
right.
I didn't like them.
Well,
They
no,
weren't
but
good. Like
at
I
that
think it was just
Well, he didn't have a choice. Like, if he wanted to play Pinhead, that was the only chance he could get. So he did
yeah.
it to be the guy. So, but yeah, as you get to 2011, Revelations was the first time you had a different Pinhead, and it did not go over well. A lot of horror community buffs, they they made Pinhead's teeth really white, and the lines on his face were red, like bloody, and they never were like that before. They didn't use any alternation on his voice. Like Doug Bradley's voice was iconic, but they still put a little reverb and depth on it and made it deeper and made it sound better. This they didn't even bother with that. Um,
Mhm.
and half this movie is found footage, which is a no-no. And in this one, just to sum this up real quick and move on, you have two families with their sons Nico and Steven. They go to Tijuana, Mexico, hire a prostitute, end up killing said prostitute. They film it, and you jump back and forth in time. So later on, the sister of one of the brothers finds the video, and to try and save him and everybody, she tries to figure out the puzzle. But you find out Stephen, one of the brothers, because he killed the prostitute to save his soul, was trying to deliver his family to Pinhead and them, and it was terrible. Like bad deaths, wasn't scary. You don't do found footage in this type of situation or in the Hellraiser movies. Let me see what I got written here. I, I don't care. These movies suck. This one especially, and it wasn't even that it was a different Pinhead. It was that they didn't bother to even keep the lore proper. Like, like now he was straight up a slasher villain who showed up to kill, didn't slowly torture anybody. They didn't even like Friday the 13th.
Mhm.
The deaths were all different, and you came to see what they were going to do. By this point, oh yeah, Pinhead's power is chains with hooks on him. He'll pull you apart. Whoop de doo. Like
Mhm.
he cuts off people's heads real quick. He doesn't torture anybody. Like this is really where they jumped the shark completely. Where oh, we really don't need this. This is terrible. But the one good thing
Was
to
that
come out of
Judgment? Is that what you said?
no, that I was about to say
Okay.
the guy who did the makeup for Pinhead's character in the last two movies before Judgment, is the guy who directed Judgment and played the part of the collector. And this was a really good return to form where there was good ideas, good makeup, good story, except for the fact that in Judgment you follow two detectives who are trying to chase down a murderer, and it's almost like the movie Seven. Like he's literally the killer's putting Bible quotes down, says he's doing it for the Lord or whatnot, and you find out, spoilers as always, the killer is one of the detectives, and he's such a bad guy. Like he's cheating on his wife, and he's killed people before, and he was in the army and this and that. Where when Pinhead and the Collector and them get him, an angel from heaven shows up and says, "You can't have him. We need him because he is bringing a balance to good and evil." And one of the best parts of this whole movie is at the end, there's a battle between Pinhead and an angel. Pinhead uses his chain hooks, hooks up the angel, and rips her completely apart. But because he does this, he's punished. And you may ask, how do you punish a demon? He's sent back to Earth as a mortal. And the last scene is a homeless guy with the scars, and it's the guy out of makeup, and that guy does a good job. It's yet another guy, but he does a good job. So that's the punishment for somebody like Pinhead. He's sent back to Earth as a mortal, and that movie was on Netflix. Didn't like none of these. Now the next one's supposed to be back in the theater, but
Mm-hmm.
Judgment. If anybody who has maybe not seen any but one or two or three, you can skip the rest. But Judgment, I recommend because they do a good job of bringing it back, trying some of the lore. And the story is a little wonky, but it's a movie. You have to have a story. And for a guy who did the makeup effects, putting his hand in on making a movie about it, he did a really good job.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to bring one thing up before we retrospect. There is I don't know if it's a fan made film per se, but it was a short film called Hellraiser No More Souls. And you can find it on YouTube for anybody who wants to look. And in this, you have Pinhead giving a speech where nuclear World War III happened, and he says, for the first couple millennia, the billions of souls coming through was the greatest thing that ever happened to us. But now all that's over. And in this short film, Pinhead opens the box and lets the Cenobites kill him because he's just tired of doing it and he's bored. And it's done well, and it looks like one of the movies. So no More Souls. Look that up. I suggest that. I recommend that because it's short and it gives you an answer to, well, how would one of them even kill themselves? And I will say throughout these movies they bring up that magical items
Mm-hmm.
can kill or hurt the Cenobites, and it's kind of a broad statement saying magic. Like, what's magic at that point? Like,
Mm-hmm.
because religious items, some do hurt them and some don't. You know, you can't put a cross on Pinhead and it works. But um, so those last ones, Judgment and that short film, I highly recommend. And we could all cross our fingers that David Brucker can come back, and when all this pandemic is over, if they get back on track, bring us a back to form. And if, like you had said, I hope they go female Pinhead because it's a good change. It is different enough, but it might hurt where people don't want that, who want the original. But I'm not in that camp because you've done it
I
enough
mean,
time,
it's like, but it could possibly be scarier with a girl. I
right?
mean,
And
but like you're saying, like change isn't necessarily bad. Like people want all of them to be the same. Well, it's like you got the first one, you got the second one, you got those
you got
already. You
10
know.
movies.
Well, you know what I mean. Like they want the
No,
feel
you're
good
right,
of. They want that feel of the first ones.
right?
Um,
And
but it's not
that's
necessarily bad to change. Just they need to try to do a better job. They haven't been. They've been kind of lazy with a lot of these movies. Where they just have people that are making them that maybe don't really care about the franchise,
no,
and that's why it's like garbage. You know, they don't really
it's about
care.
rights and keeping the name and just, yeah, like one
And the
good
money too,
example.
because like fans, diehard fans, are gonna go see every one, even if it's like, oh, it might suck. It's like people
I
are gonna,
will.
yeah, like me too. That's what I'm saying. Like, um, we're gonna watch them and see what they're gonna be like, but they know they could get money from people like us.
For me, like they can change it to people or whatnot. If
Hmm.
you have an interesting story, make it where the kills are worth something. Like you need us to care about the people in the movie, and
Yeah.
you need us to care about the situation. You don't need the whole world at stake, but that's not what most horror movies are about. Now, here's something to think about. In Halloween 4, at the end of that, Jamie Lloyd, played by the beautiful, great Danielle Harris, she kills her step or stabs her stepmom, and they were going to make her the new killer, like Michael Myers was as a kid.
Hmm.
And so many people in the business world of it didn't want it. They threw that out the window. And like Halloween 3 did terrible because it wasn't even about Michael Myers anymore. So that's the line
Yeah.
you got to walk where we want to change it, but how far do you go before people just outright don't want to see it? Yeah, people like us will go see it. You're right, but there's some people who know about Panic. Yeah, I've seen one of those, and that's great. Oh, you're changing it, boo, boo, boo. But
Hmm.
uh, I suggest everybody gives it a chance if this happens. And they hired this guy. It wasn't just like they've been talking to so and so. No, David Brucker signed on to be the director, and the story started to be written right as the pandemic got out of hand. So it's on hold, but all we can do is hope it gets back on track.
Well, I mean, being on hold isn't necessarily the most negative thing. Like, it could be good that
No.
they have more time to work on it. Even like maybe it would give them a little extra time to make sure that they land it better this time. And you know,
Yeah, because you just like anything, you need to rewrite that sucker a time or two and see what you come up with.
well, yeah, you
I
don't
had
want them to just keep like spewing out a bunch of movies. Like, it's good if they take their time with stuff to try and
right.
make it actually good. You know.
I have one last fun fact here. Are you ready for this?
Okay.
This is from the comics, where the comics are in the same continuity. Now, some of the comics strayed, but in
Mhm.
the main line of the comics, the character of Jack the Ripper the, from real life became a Cenobite called Saucy Jack. He he when he died, I think in that one he opened the box and he kept his face, but they replaced his hands with deadly weapons. So I think that's awesome. Where Jack the Ripper became Saucy Jack, a Cenobite.
Oh well, I mean, that guy would be a Cenobite. You know.
Yeah, and he had like hooks holding his skin on weird stuff, but that's just in the comics. But I do
That's
recommend for
actually kind of a neat thing because like
yeah,
people really don't know what happened to the dude, so it's like, oh, he's a
yeah,
Cenobite now, or whatever. It's like, where'd he go? Um, so that's
yeah.
interesting.
But I highly recommend for anybody who loves to read about the lore of movies and any comic book fans like me and Max and you, where the comics do a really good job of like what the movie couldn't talk about because they didn't have time. And there's a lot of them. So look up first, like the first run, and I think it was IDW Comics ran it because it wasn't like Marvel or DC. It was one of the second runs, but they did a really good job. So I recommend that. And I thought that was a really interesting fact that Saucy Jack was Jack the Ripper as a Cenobite.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. I've never read these Hellraiser comics. I know that they exist. I really just don't know where to buy something like that. I guess eBay, but
Oh well, no, now everything's online, obviously. But
yeah,
um, if you're really interested, I can send you a link one day with the comic company. But yeah, you could just look up now Amazon or eBay or such
yeah.
and find those. So now, little question and answer period. How many out of these 10 movies did you see in the theater?
I didn't see any of these in the theater.
None?
No.
Oh, okay. What was the
I
first
was
one
way
you
too
ever
young,
saw?
and my parents like The first one I saw?
ever?
First one I saw was the first one, and I was
Okay.
probably like 5 or 6. I was like a little kid,
Wow.
and it was on like Cinemax or whatever.
Yeah.
My parents had like the expensive Cox, where you have like all the channels.
Yeah.
So I would stay up late in the night. I wasn't supposed to, but I'd be up, late, and you'd be skipping through the channels, and I would always look for the scary movies,
Right.
and then I would just like watch them, and I'd be so freaked out. But but that was one of the movies that I was really horrified of when I was a
Right.
kid. And then that Matthew McConaughey that Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Frailty.
No, Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh,
Matthew McConaughey, he was in
generations.
one of those. Yeah. Um, that movie
I didn't.
scared me too.
Yeah, he had a robot leg.
He wasn't scared. I didn't. Well, I don't think I had a crush on him then because I was a little kid. I don't know who he was really, but like, I just thought the Leatherface was scary in that movie. He
Yeah,
was wearing, he was
because
putting on the lipstick and all that. I was like, oh my goodness, who is this?
yeah. Well, see, Leatherface is spooky to me because he is a straight up human. They never make him supernatural. Like
No,
Michael Myers, eventually he gets shot so many times. There's no way he's human. Jason's been dead and Freddy's been dead. Pinhead, they're demons. But Leatherface was always just a messed up family that ate
yeah,
people, and Leatherface was a mindless brute. Like he
he
had the
was.
mind of a
He had
child.
like, what do they call it, gynophilia or so, I don't know. He was like kind of
Face.
weird. He was well, like yeah, he had this weird obsession with women.
Yeah, he wore lipstick even in the first one, but it wasn't until the third on where sometimes he wore a dress or
No, but
like,
he was weird. It's like he seemed like he was really, really attracted to women, but he also like
oh
kind of
yeah,
wanted to be them in a way, and he would,
well,
take their skin and
uh,
he wanted their
huh.
faces and stuff too. Like he's real
my
creepy to
favorite
me.
my favorite Texas is the second one,
Oh,
even though
mine
that was
too.
more comedic. But
That one was silly, but it was good.
in that one, when he's going, he has the chainsaw up against the girl's leg. He makes some motions like he's having a little premature something, to
Hmm.
where, and in that one, they go, "Why didn't you kill her? Is that your girlfriend?" And he kind of makes a face like, "Oh, I do like her," and he doesn't kill her because he does like her, and that brings a little humanity to Leatherface. But he
Yeah.
also he also gets a chainsaw in his gut and comes back later. So
Well, no, I guess like there was somewhat in a weird way, she could kind of trust him to help her get away from the family and different scenes in that movie, which was strange. But it didn't seem like he kind of wanted to keep her as like his little pet or something,
oh yeah, my
But
one of my favorite things in that is
he was
because,
not very smart though either. Though that's the
oh
thing
no, yeah,
about he's a dummy.
in one of, well, first, before, in two, he's going crazy with the chainsaw, and the girl's in front of him screaming. Her name is Slim in the movie, and
Yeah,
eventually she literally goes, all right, let's just talk," and she has to bring it down to earth. She's like, "This is ridiculous. Let's talk this out." But no, his mouth is messed up. He can't speak, and he has face deformities. It's
yeah,
just why he's supposed to wear the faces. And in one of them, he has a, it's not a speak and spell, but like an image comes up and it's a clown. And you have to put what it is. And like one of them is a car and he puts car. But when the clown comes up, he puts food, FOOD, to show like he considers humans food. And it's funny, but no, he has the mind of a child, literally.
yeah. He's like a mute and stuff too. Like he doesn't talk. He's like cannibal. The whole families are cannibals
Yeah.
actually. You know,
Hmm.
like all of them eat people. Um, Grandma was scary when I was a kid. I always thought she's
Well,
scary. Now my
let's
mom
bring.
basically is turned into the grandma from that movie, so now I'm like, okay, well, I'm not trying to be mean, but
Okay, well, let's bring it back real quick. This was our retrospective on the Hellraiser franchise. We are
mm,
in the midst of having a new one possible when movies come back. Um, we both have come, we both say, if you're gonna watch any of these, You can start with one and two. Three is at least worth watching. Then Judgment, and then I recommend the short film No More Souls. But the other ones are classic horror movie schlock. Oh, a group of teenagers and cliches, like the car won't start. Ridiculousness. But if you're an ultra Pinhead fan, maybe you can sit through it. But some are just cop stories and Pinhead's in it, or there's a cheating husband and he's evil and Pinhead's in it. So I don't highly recommend any of these, but
Mhm.
we went through all 10 that exist as of now.
Mhm.
Gave you the highlights. So I hope this helps everybody who may just know a little, or if you, we always say, me and Max tell people, see it if you haven't seen it, or if you have, watch it again and see what you think or what you remember. Because even I, looking into these to get info, I haven't seen, Inferno, Revelations, and all that in a long time. So seeing clips from the movies was cool because I'm like, oh, I remember that. I didn't remember Henry Cavill, Superman, was in one of them, and that's always good. Or Lance Hendrickson. I did remember he was the bad guy, but
Mhm.
so that's all my recommendation. Now, at the end, like we always do, I'm going to rank the movies as a whole, as the whole franchise.
Mhm.
Now, this is a little biased for me because this is my favorite horror killer, not the franchise, because it did stray a lot.
Mhm.
But overall, I'm going to give the Hellraiser franchise a 9.0.
9.0.
I think if they were to have not had some of the dumb ones, it would have been even better. But you have to
Yeah.
take what you can get. But
Are we just so we're gonna rate it as a whole? Okay. So
yeah,
okay.
there's 10 movies. So as a whole, I give it a 9.0. So over to you.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna give it a 8.5
Okay.
just because of I feel like I only like the first three. To be fully honest, I
Huh?
don't feel like I liked any of the others. I've tried to watch them. But I recommend you guys try to do it too, see if you can sit through it, just for the hell of it or whatever. But
Yeah.
I just thought they were such a drag, man. Like
Oh,
I didn't have that same, and plus I'm really into like horror movies from the 80s. I also just like that time period.
right.
Um, so I don't know, like the 2000 early 2000s or whatever. Like they didn't have that feel. So I'm a little bit like, oh, I like the way the first ones were. But I didn't think they needed to repeat the same thing or anything, but
Uh-uh.
they just didn't execute it very well, what they were trying to do, and I didn't like the CGI in some of them, like, the
Yeah.
CGI dog or whatever, that wasn't very scary to me, the twins weren't scary. There's a lot of stuff I just thought was really
Well,
dumb looking.
fun fact that goes into as far as like the fact that CGI came about a lot. When you got to, I believe it was Revelations, they made that movie for $300,000, and that's
Really?
terrible. Like
The
the
first one was
first,
1,000,000, I think, and
well, even
they
the first,
they
the
didn't have
first. Okay,
that was $1,000,000 wasn't even that much. They had to film it in a house, like, because they didn't have,
right, that's
high
all they had,
budget,
but they made it work.
Mhm.
But to go all the way to your, let's see, that one was 2011. You get that far, but it was so bad. Like the first Halloween was like 500,000, something like that. So you had even less than the movie from the 1970s, and that should tell you how bad the later ones were, where all they had money for was like the makeup. So I think
Yeah,
that's a good sign of where they went. But Judgment, also, they didn't have a lot to work with, but they did a really good job of bringing it back to form. Where, like, yeah, bad people, bad killers, and not I'm bad as in good, not bad meaning bad. Like Michael
yeah,
Jackson bad, as they say. So they really brought it back to form on that one, and it did look good. They had a good-looking actor to play Pinhead because Doug Bradley, and Doug Bradley has shown up in some of these like as a small role. Like he'd be the homeless guy who talks to somebody, but he was never Pinhead. And now, yeah, he's so up in age, it really wouldn't benefit, to do that. So
yeah.
we don't know who the next one's going to be. But I thought that'd be fun to let people know. Like, eventually, they had no money for these movies, so
Yeah, it's
That's
like,
what.
well, yeah, I guess it just like the budget got cut. Yeah, but I didn't like. Okay, the Cenobites felt scary in the first and second one, but then by the
Yeah.
third one, they really just weren't scary at all. Just or silly, Um,
Yeah.
because like Return of the Living Dead, like we were talking about, like that movie's scary and funny. They were able to
Yeah.
like both, but with this, it was just like it was like kind of like all the blasphemous stuff, like it was trying to be like edgy and all that, and it was just kind of corny, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Just came out like silly to me, and
No, you're right.
it could have brought like religion and stuff. It was just kind of like why did I even
Yeah, they didn't need to do all that.
like why you gotta do that, you know? Um, but the Cenobites, they actually were dressed in like bondage wear, so like what the clothes are based
Oh yeah.
bondage and punk rock like leather, like tight leather and stuff. Um, and they could have, like did like safety pins and stuff stuck to their skin, and like just they could have added something like that because that was basically what they were going for. Because people that are into like sadomasochist stuff, they usually wear like lots of leather, like as kind of a thing, you know.
Oh, what do you call those people that they do it nowadays where they put hooks in their back and be hung by it? You
Oh,
know what
I
I'm talking about?
did that. I dated some guy that did that. It was weird.
That's a form of this though. Like people still get a little pleasure from the pain. That's sadomasochism in a nutshell. You know?
Yeah, like like it's corny, kind of like they're like stuff.
Uh, I don't recommend it at all.
It's crazy. That's just insane. But I mean, if people want to do that, that's fine. You could do it if you want to do that. I don't do that. My back already hurts. I don't make it worse.
We don't judge.
Yeah, we
Nothing
don't
to
judge,
them.
but it's not my style.
And we don't want anybody to hurt themselves either. So,
Yeah, yeah, that's
but
you know. But people
but
like that kind of stuff, and a lot of
sure.
people that are into that stuff, they probably just like these films because they're like, oh yeah, that's like the weird kind of sex stuff I'm into. Like put the hooks in me.
Oh yeah, like the hooks in the back. I mean, I don't know why people do it, but some people say they don't even feel it,
Well,
and that
the
might be why. You know.
I'm not trying to bring up like somebody I dated because it's kind of weird, but the person that I was talking about, like they said that you feel like adrenaline or something.
All right.
Like, oh, I feel like adrenaline all through my body after I do it or something. I'm like, oh, it's still kind of dumb to me, but whatever, you
Yeah.
know,
All right.
you know.
Well, there you go, everybody. There is our giant retrospective on the great Hellraiser franchise. Some of it's great, but
Hmm.
I hope this was informative. We love to bring info, especially when it deals with horror. And this, the horror can be good when it's good. And check it out if you haven't, or if you have, check it out again because you never know what you missed. I even went back and saw stuff that I didn't remember.
Hmm.
And I love this franchise. I love the good ones. But there you go. So I hope this is informative and fun for everyone.
Hmm. Well, if you guys have any questions about these movies, you could also leave comments and we'll reply to them.
Or
'Cause
suggestions.
yeah, or if there's anything, because this isn't live because of like the virus situation. We're doing things. We're recording and then we're premiering for you guys. So, we're not ignoring anybody. So, all you people in the chat.
And we'll be in the chat so you can find us there.
Mhm.
At least one of us, but so far we've all been there. Even Max comes to show up and
Yeah.
chat and help us out. And I can, at least for us, we are working on more Terror Tuesday, which could be a show, could be that's not our movie reviews, but could be horror updates. You never know what we're gonna bring. We're gonna keep bringing Theater Thursday, where we review movies. You never know what you're gonna get,
And TV
and
series and stuff.
TV series. Like Tiger King was a Netflix, but it's basically a movie broken down.
Yeah.
Um,
It's like documentary series.
Right. And as always, Saturday is our big show where
Mhm.
we try and bring the most for you. And these are our longest shows, but we try and bring as much as we can. So
Mhm.
stay tuned for more as always. and hit us up anytime. Any comments, questions, or suggestions?
Okay. I think that's it.
I
We wrap
think
it
that's
up.
it too. Yeah.
All right. Y'all.
So, bye from me.
All right. Adios, y'all.